You're listening to Cinema Rex. It is an Iranian film podcast. Episode 26, Bahram Beyzaie's Downpour. Ragbar.
Think of how weird it was to look at your hands in VR and how fascinating it was to look at your hands and oh, you move your fingers and you see your fingers move and you move your hands and you see your hands move, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seeing you holding your son right now, it's a lot like that. Like with a newborn, looking at their hands, they're like, wow, if I move my hand moves. If I move my finger moves.
I don't even think he's there yet. I think he's so young he doesn't even realize those hands belong to him yet. But yes, we do currently have our youngest guest ever on the show. And I don't think anyone will ever beat it because, good luck beating 3 months. Tiam Mohebi is an acclaimed writer, director, filmmaker, artist, entrepreneur. He's mostly focusing on keeping his diaper clean, and projects include screaming at night and drinking bottles of milk. Welcome to the show, Tiam. How are you doing? What's wrong? Power through the All right, we're gonna edit this to be way cuter than it is.
What happened? Did he poop?
Barn, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Dur bar shama dostan aziz. This is a Cinema Rex podcast where we talk all things film, cinema, television, love, children, babies, one of which is in my hand right now. What else do we talk about, Farn?
Montages.
We can just dive right in, but before we do, I want to mention that the really cool thing about this is that this film was restored. We're doing Downpour, which is what in Farsi?
Ragbar.
Yeah, by Bahram Beyzaie. And I want to, before we even do a plot summary, I want to just mention that this film was restored in 2011 by Cineteca di Bologna in association with the Film Foundation's World Cinema Project and Bahram Beyzaie. And for those who don't know, the World Cinema Project is a non-profit organization devoted to the preservation and restoration of neglected world cinema. And it was founded by Martin Scorsese. So before we dive in, I'm just going to let Martin Scorsese talk a bit about this film.
Now, in the case of the picture that you're about to see, Bahram Beyzaie's Ragbar, or Downpour, it was made in pre-revolutionary Iran in 1972. And all we had was the director's own badly damaged, extremely worn 35mm print with English subtitles burned into the film itself. Beyzaie, who now lives in Palo Alto, California, and teaches at Stanford as a renowned playwright, a theater and film historian, a prolific author, and one of his home country's greatest filmmakers. Downpour, which is about a sophisticated teacher who finds work in a provincial town and falls in love with a young local woman, was a great success at the time it was released. But it was taken out of circulation in the 1980s by the newly formed theocratic government, along with several of Beyzaie's other films. The elements were impounded and most likely destroyed, everything but that one beat-up 35mm print. Working with Beyzaie, the Cineteca di Bologna and l'Immagine Ritrovata put hundreds of hours into this restoration. And given these limitations, I think the final result is excellent. This restoration also stands as a reminder to a repressive and intolerant political regime that occasionally something that has been destroyed can actually be brought back to life.
Thanks, Marty. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yes. Thank you for taking the time to come on to Cinema Rex.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Plot summary for Downpour. Mr. Hekmati, a well-educated and humble teacher, arrives in a new city and at a new job in southern Tehran. After kicking out one of the unruly students, Mosayeb, his older sister Atife barges in, reprimanding Hekmati for kicking him out. The two have a quick, flirtatious yet unspoken connection, which soon becomes the gossip of not only the school staff but the entire town, from neighborhoods to school kids. Rahim, the town butcher and local strongman, also has eyes on Atife, and a passive-aggressive rivalry between Hekmati and Rahim slowly balloons to violence. Meanwhile, a new school hall is in need of reconstruction, and Hekmati is determined to personally remodel and design the dilapidated building to prove his worth and standing in the community. The love triangle soon becomes a larger topic of town gossip as Hekmati quickly begins to find a place in the community and is no longer able to deny his love for Atife, who herself is torn between her feelings for Hekmati and her sense of duty for Rahim, who has been providing her and her family with a roof over their head for years. It's a tale of love, gossip, and identity within an environment where commitments and social problems often stand in the way between people and their dreams, against a backdrop of the politically charged fear of strangers and the secret police in Tehran's South End. It has no Rotten Tomato score or audience score because old Iranian films don't get that kind of love. But Farhan, please enlighten me. What did you think of Downpour?
I liked the movie. I have some issues, but there's also things that I really liked. The movie definitely feels, because what was the release date? It was 77?
71.
71. Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. His short film was something like 69 or something, right?
Yeah.
Right. This movie coming out in 71 is a little obvious at first glance because it kind of feels like a bridge between different styles of Iranian filmmaking. Like, it definitely has some of the style of those old film Farsi movies, but it also is leaning more in the direction of something with more artistic integrity, quote unquote, something that's more serious, something that's more like that tries to do different things with cinematic language. Whereas a lot of those film Farsi movies just kind of felt like a play that was just being shot. The camera work was like fine. Once in a while, they did something interesting. But in this, like right off the bat, the way that things are framed, people are having conversations through like objects that are like shaped like a frame as they're talking to each other. There's interesting camera movements. Sometimes there's lines given directly to camera. Sometimes they're not, and for different effects. It felt a lot like a merging of those old film Farsi movies and Night of the Hunchback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was almost as if once Night of the Hunchback played in Iran, tons of Iranian filmmakers started to go, oh, wait, we can actually implement these like interesting bits of cinematic language and speak through the camera the same way that we're speaking through our characters. And so for that, it was really cool to see. I think stylistically, Beyzaie's movies, and I think I figured it out. I think I figured out why. Like now seeing this and Bashu, I think he's stylistically kind of similar to Sam Raimi in some ways.
Okay.
Do you agree with that? Do you know where I'm going with this?
No. And no.
With cinematic language, he will tell you what he's thinking. He will tell you what you're supposed to be feeling. If a character is angry, he will show them get angry. If a character is sad, he will show them get sad. And a lot of times it's like front and center in the screen. And so for that, sometimes I would be like, oh, this feels a little too much, or it borders on the territory of camp for me sometimes. But I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just a different style. Like some people are really into style. Sam Raimi is an acclaimed filmmaker. Bahram Beyzaie is an acclaimed filmmaker. I just don't think it's always my preference. Whereas someone like Mehjoui, who was coming up around the same time, I find that his cinematic language to be a little more subtle. And that's kind of more where I lean into. But all that being said, I still definitely like the film. But we can dive into more of what I liked and didn't like specifically as we get into it. How about you, Kaveh?
I'll just say a couple things off the top. First, as I mentioned earlier, this film was destroyed by the government. And only one copy was left existing. And that was Bahram Beyzaie's personal copy. When Scorsese's company, World Cinema Project, was able to work with Beyzaie, the reason like you even have the subtitles burned into the copy is because that was literally the only copy left ever existence.
Oh, that was the version he had, yeah.
Yeah. So because it's gone through this amazing restoration. Also, you got to admit, like the quality is really good compared to some of the Iranian movies we saw, right?
Oh, it was incredible.
It's one of, if not...
I was shocked. Because of that disclaimer, I was like, oh, this is going to look like it was dragged through the dirt. But no, it looked beautiful.
It is one of, if not the only pre-Islamic film available on Blu-ray in Iranian history, because everything else from the period is in really rough shape.
Oh, wow.
To talk about the film, I love this movie. I love everything about it. I don't just like it. I love how we meet practically every character in the very first scene, introduced in that first scene with the carriage. I love the cinematography that's heavily influenced by Italian neorealism. I love the junk in the carriage, that big mirror off the top that he's like carrying that's reflecting stuff. I love Mr. Rahim when he first meets Hekmati, he's looking at himself in the mirror, because Hekmati's holding the mirror and he like shakes his hand. He's like looking at himself. During the panic with the unruly kids, I love how the music plays and it feels like Psycho, like you're watching Hitchcock or something. The score was composed by Sheda Qarachedari. I love the romantic comedy feel of it. I love how it kind of reminds me of a Woody Allen-esque sort of 70s
Yeah.
character.
Definitely. Also, a lot of those like old French romance films.
Yes. I feel the film has so much atmosphere. It makes me nostalgic for a place I've never been before. It has so much character, in my opinion. I love Parvana Masumi. I have such a crush on her. Rest in peace, she passed away last year at the age of 78.
You lost your shot.
Well, yeah, because at one point I was just watching the film for my third time yesterday, and I was like, I wonder if it's not too late for me and her to figure things out. I just love so much about what this film is, and I think you're right. And we could dive into, like, I did a lot of research, which just made me feel so much more for everything this film is. But Beyzaie very much talks in detail about how he didn't find himself attracted to film Farsi at the time. Like, all the films of like strongman, badass characters, he didn't like find a connection to them. And he deliberately wanted to make a film that was different. And that's why he's one of these, like, he's one of the forefathers of Iranian New Age. Like The Cow, Merjui's The Cow. Or he just wanted to make elevated work. But at the same time, a lot of what he's doing, like the strongman, the butcher, Rahim, when it comes down to that like knife fight when they're drunk, that's supposed to be a reference to these like bad man, strong mans from film Farsi that always carry a knife, like these bully type characters.
Right.
You know, he's got kind of this Biff Tannen from Back to the Future vibe to him. And he's deliberately trying to be like, this is like that type of character, but I'm going to elevate him. I'm going to make him a little bit more complicated. Like, he's not such a bad guy.
Yeah. And see, that scene that you just mentioned, that's kind of, to me, an example of where I was like, oh, okay, this is camp, where it's like, it's taking a trope and it's pushing it to like an extreme to like make entertaining commentary on it.
Well, I think because Beyzaie doesn't take himself that seriously too. Like, he loves playing with comedy and playing with tone that way. Like there's so much in this film that you can see later on.
Well, even like the antics that the main character gets into whenever he loses his temper, right? Like right off the bat, he's like, "Oh, that's my mother's heirloom on the cart," and it's the last thing left. And then it's like, "Can you take care of it?" And then the cart rolls away.
Yeah. And
then he goes and he gets it, and finally he gets it after this like chase of this cart all the way down a hill. He finally gets it, sees the woman. And he's so dumbstruck with the woman that he drops part of the...
It's a lamp. It's a part of a lamp.
Yeah. Part of it drops and breaks. And then he loses his temper because he broke the one part. So then he smashes the other part.
Yeah.
That's again, part of that thing where I'm like, okay, this is definitely more campy than something like The Cow.
Yeah. And it's because he loves playing with tone and style. You can see the editing choices. There's jokes that are literally just in the cut. Like when Hekmati wants to fight Rahim, he's like, "I'm going to fight you." And all of a sudden he punches him once and Rahim goes to swing to punch him again. And it cuts to Hekmati being pulled away on a stretcher, essentially. Like, that's a really funny cut.
Well, no, Rahim backhands him and then it smash cuts to him knocked out on the way.
Knocked out. That's like a comedic cut you'll see in like Adam Sandler movies today. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Simpsons will use a cut like that. And to think that was like 71 in Iran. Or even the montage of him like training. And he's like going to bulk up and he's doing all these like silly things. One of them is like he's holding a small weight in his teeth and he's like lifting his neck like that. Like, these are really, really funny moments. And I think it's because he doesn't take, like, he's making a sophisticated neorealist Iranian film. But it does have, like you say, like the Night of the Hunchback effects of like, he is kind of having fun with this. One of the notes he had said in an interview that he said to Sheda Qarechedari, the composer, he was like, "I want you to think of them like a cat and mouse between Rahim and Hekmati, and it's very playful. I want this film to be a playground. If you the only direction he gave the composer was, if you feel like this at times needs to feel like a cartoon, make the music feel like that. Like, I don't mind." He wanted it to be fun. He wanted to, anytime he could find a joke in a cut or in editing, be playful. You know, there's a whole like series of like, there's a montage of people giving him advice. You know, you should try doing this. You should do this. Like, a lot of people, like the townspeople gossiping. It's like always light on its feet. It has like elements of like rom-com feels to it that are kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah. And in some instances, it even reminded me a little bit of Wes Anderson.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
But I think both him and Wes Anderson are probably also drawing inspiration from a lot of French comedies from the time.
I mean, there's so much to dissect that we can go through when we talk about it, but I just think this is a gem of Iranian cinema. I cannot praise this enough. I every time I watch it, I enjoy it more and more. And I really feel like also you might find, I thought about you a lot because I was really curious as to how you'd feel about this film. And I actually think it's your first time seeing it, right?
Yeah.
I bet you if you watch it a second or third time without the constraints of having to worry about plotting and whatever, and really just soak in the individual scenes, I feel like you could almost feel like an affinity to this film because your first feature is a romantic comedy as well, albeit more modern and contemporary. But it's almost like you could draw a line of Iranian rom-com. Like this guy's like your ancestor in terms of the type of film. This was his first feature, and Tehran was your first feature, and there's like a connection there. You guys are like, you both made your first features a rom-com that is some sort of a subject. It's a reference to the times. It's a reaction, and so I feel like this film, I truly believe of a lot of the films we've seen, this one would find a place in your heart with more viewings because there's so many weird, interesting things he's doing that. Like, I get what you mean about now I get what you mean about Sam Raimi. Like, I'm not a huge fan of I love horror and I love comedy, and I'm not a huge Evil Dead fan. It just doesn't resonate with me.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that is? Is it because tonally it's kind of like...
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just, sometimes if it's just like some flavors just don't work for you. But I don't think that this, I mean, that might be the case for this, but I get what you mean. He's got such a distinct style. I think this is a very different film from Bashu too.
Yeah.
Which is like like tonally, it's not as dark or heavy.
And you know what's interesting is some of the deliveries in Bashu, I take more issue with than I do here. Because I feel like here it all kind of fits the vibe and the aesthetic of the film. Whereas Bashu is more of a contemporary movie. And so when it does a lot of the same things that this does, I think it bumps me more in Bashu. You know what I mean? So, and I agree that I think that if I was to see this again, I think I would appreciate it more the more that I see it. Because part of what took me out of the movie this time was that kind of tonal ping-ponging.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, now it's a very serious scene. Oh, now it's like goofy. Oh, now it's slapstick. Now it's this, right? And a big part of that is, again, this is Beyzaie's first feature-length film, so he's really having fun with it, right? So he's still discovering his own voice as he's making this movie. And I think that when you have better familiarity with this film, I think you can enjoy it more. Yeah. Because then you're not constrained by like, where's the plot going? What's happening here? Like, I'll say straight up, I genuinely think that this movie's too long.
Yeah, I mean,
like there's some things that happen that I'm like, oh, I get that this was like a fun thing to do, but looking at this movie as a whole, I think this scene or this sequence should just be taken out. Like the training montage, I love the training montage. But if you remember, there's like a mini training montage 20 minutes before that one.
Right, maybe.
When he first goes and joins. And that one to me is like, why is this one? Like, take this one out. Like, you already have that other one that's so good. This one is, it's kind of showing your hand. But these are things that in a first time feature, you'll get that. Like, I made tons of decisions that if I could go back, I would change them now. Right?
Yeah. Part of the thing too is there's three things. Beyzaie said that he essentially didn't finish the script before they started production. They started shooting and he was like, I haven't finished the third act of this film yet. And he always thought he was going to find time, but so many problems kept occurring during production that he was like on the fly, like, how is this story going to end? So a lot of the third act was improvised. He also had, I'll go into it in behind the scenes, but he had such a small crew that they were very short on how much reel they had. So a lot of their shots, they only had one take. They're like, whatever happens, this is going to be the take. If there's a mistake, that's not part of the film. The third thing is this footage was partially destroyed by the government. So even though it's been restored, there are parts missing and like things that have to get stitched together. And I'm not saying for the runtime, but why you might say that it feels like one second, it feels like this type of film, 1 second. This is a film that was like salvaged. This is not like its true form. It was like restitched together by...
Is any of it missing? I thought it was all there.
There's just, I think, there isn't stuff necessarily missing like plot points, but I think there's some scenes you can kind of notice there's like a little bit, if there's like a weird janky edit or something or a strange cut that doesn't seem to make sense, it's usually because of that. Like they're trying to piece together stuff. And that would affect the tone, right? That'll affect the pacing and tone.
Sure, yeah. But that makes sense in terms of having to like construct a new ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of the stuff, especially in the ending was especially where I was like, what? Like, where's the story going?
Yeah.
Like, it definitely did feel improvised the last, like, half hour of the movie.
Did you catch this? Because I never caught this the first two times I watched it, and this third time when doing research, I figured out. But do you catch the whole like headlines, the news headline stuff that happens?
What does it say? I made a point to ask you.
It's just like after that he's awarded his prize, it's just like major news headlines saying that there's been an earthquake in parts of Iran, and there's been a death toll and a major devastation. So the very next scene is the next scene is like almost like a not a funeral procession, but it's like
It's like a morning
parade, and they're collecting money to save. And and for whatever reason, I guess partly because of the process of restoring this film, that information has been like left. Like they didn't really know how to put that in. And also maybe they thought that doesn't make or break. But that's essentially, I think, when we're starting to head into the third act.
I think they show it. They just didn't translate it in the subtitles, and you and I can't read Farsi. At least not that quickly. Like I can read Farsi, but very slowly. So it like went by way too quick on the screen, and I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on.
And there's the scene when he's following the graffiti, which they don't translate to. And the graffiti the kids have spray painted on the wall says, "Follow this line."
Yeah.
Come this way. And both Hekmati and Atif are finding it, and they're like leading it.
That I was able to read. That was on screen long enough that I was able to track.
But it's funny because I guess like you get it at the end of the kids have painted this to kind of bring them together. But there's just little things like that.
They set that up. They set it up before.
That what?
Because there's a scene where the kids are running through the alleyways and they're ripping down the posters.
Yeah.
And so know, okay, the kids are preparing to do something in the alleyway.
Yeah, but if you don't read Farsi, you don't know what is being written on the wall.
Right, yeah.
You don't know it says follow the line.
Yeah, the subtitles were like very jank. There's times where he is translated as she.
Yeah.
That's because
Beyzaie personally did it himself, literally with a typewriter. However the process is done, because it also looks like typewriter font. You notice it's like literally vibrating.
Yeah.
Because on every like cell, it's probably in a slightly different spot, so it's like a little bit like shaky.
I think it's done on an optical printer. So you project it over a frame where you have the text on it.
But then why does it vibrate?
Because the projector, either the plate that the text was on was vibrating,
okay,
or the projector that was projecting the film, the what that was on was vibrating. I think it's more likely that what the plate was mounted to with the subtitles on it, that was vibrating. Yeah. So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the vibration of the subtitle plate.
Okay, yeah. Okay. But yeah, all of that is like, he did it himself. So again, I'll go into like behind the scenes, but he accepted no private funding. He accepted no money from the government. He accepted this is as independent of a film as it could possibly be, because he didn't want any government notes. He didn't want any intrusion from private funders. He was like, every crew member worked, he describes it as 4 people. Each person did the job of 4 people. And it was made like with duct tape and love. And that's why he wanted to make something that hadn't been done before, realistically, which is why he's considered like the godfather, one of the main forefathers of new wave cinema. Can you talk like about the characters? Did you not like find the characters? I don't know why. I find so many of them so interesting and endearing. The fact that the kids fall in love with him. The kids hate Hekmati at first. Yeah. And they won't like listen to him. But like Atif's younger brother doesn't like Hekmati because like, all the kids in school are saying like, you like my sister. But then later on, he's getting beaten up by Rahim. That boy is mad at his sister because he's like, he got beaten up because of you. Because now the kids are starting to like him. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I love that. Like that change, that growth in character.
Did you find that the switch from the kids hating him to loving him was a little quick?
No. Kids are stupid. They change their minds every day.
There were a couple of transitions and I guess character perspectives or feelings on things that I thought were a little too quick. The kids all of a sudden loving their teacher, or even how quickly our main characters fall in love with each other. Yeah. In both instances, it was a little fast. And I would have loved to have seen.
Falls in love with her at first sight.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm in love with, like, you know what I mean? It was just like.
I love that. I think if you're going to ask me, like, did you not find, and it's anything negative, I'm going to be like, no, because I love everything about that. He's preparing a speech to tell her how we have to stop. These rumors are getting out of hand. And then as soon as he sits on the bench with her, he's like, I love you. Like it comes. That's so endearing. You know that scene on the bench?
I know. But then I was expecting Atif to be like, this guy's a weirdo.
She runs away from him.
Yeah, but and even that reaction, I was like, what is this reaction? And because that reaction to me was like, it's not like she's running away because she's like, this guy's a psycho and I need to get away. She's running away because she's like bashful and like, oh no, I can't deal with this because like, I'm betrothed to that other guy, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I just found, and I think because there's some things in the last like 45 minutes of the movie that gets too much screen time.
Yeah.
I would rather spend a little more screen time to developing a little bit more of a cat and mouse between the two of them.
Yeah.
And also showing how the teacher wins over the students a little bit better.
Sure. What did you think of Rahim? I loved him.
I thought he's fine. He's very much a character taken right out of those Film Farsi movies. Like some of these characters are and some are not. He's like very much like a strong man type of guy, but he's supposed to be like a spoof of those strongman guys. And the funny thing is we see him play that strongman in other movies. Like he literally plays a strongman tough guy type big boss in the Samad movie that we reviewed.
Yeah.
Did you clock that?
I was confused. It's not Muhammad Ali Keshavarz.
No, Muhammad Ali Keshavarz is in a bunch of other movies we've seen as well. Principal. Yeah.
Yeah. Manucher Farid.
Yeah. So Manucher Farid plays the boss.
Oh, right.
In Samad and Suleiman's Carpet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then in this, he plays the Don of the town. And then Muhammad Ali Keshavarz plays the principal of the school in this. And then he also plays...
He's in lots of things.
Yeah, he plays the director in Through the Olive Trees.
Yeah.
He plays the boss in Night of the Hunchback.
See, I would disagree with you wholeheartedly about the fact that he's just a strong man because of the kind that you've seen in other film Farsi. Because I felt he's filled with so much pathos. You start off thinking he's the town butcher and it's always like a butcher type character. But then you realize... He's giving this woman rent, Atifeh. And yes, it's because he loves her. But when she's like, I'm so sorry, this and this, is like, nonsense. Don't even mention it. Like, he's not even like bringing it up with her that she's like, he's not like, don't forget, I've paid you rent. And then you realize that at one point when there's the earthquake, they're collecting money and his son comes and gives some money and he's like, go get the rest of it. And he goes into his own house and grabs a whole lot more money.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
This guy's giving more charity than anyone else. When they have their big drunken fight at the end, he's just like, he says, I realized at some point I can't live without her. I'll die if I don't have her, which is the exact same wording Hekmati says. And you realize at this point, like from his perspective, Rahim just is in love with her too. Like he's just in love with her. He can't live without her. So I just feel like you suddenly realize that he's a way more complicated three-dimensional character than just a strong man. Even that fight scene when he pulls out the knife, he catches up to Hekmati like 2 times and doesn't stab him. He puts his arm around him because he isn't really like, doesn't want to kill Hekmati. He's just almost like...
He's putting up a front.
He's putting up a front and he's not going to hurt him. You know, at the end, he puts his arm around him and they're kind of like drunkenly talking, even though he's been chasing him.
Yeah.
He's not he's sort of looks like the archetypical strongman, but his heart isn't there. Like he's a good person. And he's not like, it's not like, he's not a good person because he's kind of the villain in the story, but Beyzaie says how he's not interested in writing wholly bad characters and wholly good characters.
Yeah.
He likes people being somewhere in the middle.
And every time he sees Hekmati, he does smile and nod at him.
Yeah.
And it's usually Hekmati is the first one to like lose his temper and then trigger things.
Yeah.
Except for the first time.
Yeah.
When
he beats him up.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also, a few more quick things, then we'll move on to behind the scenes. But do you remember when the principal's trying to set him up with his daughter? And he doesn't come over to his house.
That was weird to me because everybody knows that this guy is very in love with that other woman.
Yeah, but they're trying to help him out.
I don't know. I didn't buy it. That I didn't buy because that I was like, this guy would be like, get our daughter as far away from this man as you possibly can.
No, I bought it. And not only that, but the fact that there's like war footage on the TV, and so when he's first walking in, it's like the scene is intercut with all this like gunfire and footage of war, and like they're meeting each other. He's meeting his wife and daughter, and she's like, beep. That's really fun. And then he's like, our daughter is learning English. It's like, go on, say something. And then she turns, she goes, this is my hand.
Yeah.
It's so stupid and funny. Like that's the only thing she's learned is like showing her hand and saying, this is my hand.
I love that because it reminds me a lot of people learning languages on Duolingo, including myself. Because it's like, oh wow, you're like learning to speak this language. What can you say? This is my hand.
Yeah. It's such a like useless sentence.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, yes, please. Then there's the joke about how when he's walking in the rain and he's like, he's out in the rain? Isn't he going to catch a cold? He's like, no, he's not going to catch a cold. Next scene is Hekmati like sneezing
it cuts
in another place. Like all these little cuts. Yeah. I can't say enough good things about this film. And honestly, like my third view, it's been my favorite viewing the third time.
the shot where the kids are wrestling on the ground.
Yeah.
I feel like they actually just got the kids to wrestle.
Yeah.
Because it does not look like those kids are acting, or if they like started off acting, it definitely turned into like a real fight between those two kids.
Yeah.
And the one kid, the one who plays Beyzaie, he's so great.
Yeah.
I love him. He's like such a little man.
Yeah. He's got a unique look.
Yeah, and he's like always wearing his like suit with a turtleneck under the suit, and he's carrying his little briefcase, and he's like less than 3 feet tall, and he's just like walking around everywhere. He's always got like a frown on his face. He's so serious. I love him.
Yeah,
he's so good.
I also want to give. I really like the guy who plays like Hekmati's first friend that he makes, the bearded guy who's like the professor there. I really like that character, and he reminds me a lot of my friend Reza for some reason.
I can see that.
So like I just really like that guy.
When they first find the hall that they're like, oh, we're gonna renovate this and turn it into a theater.
Yeah.
Is the theater, is that the right word? Or the auditorium?
Oh yeah.
They find the hall and they're like, okay, we're gonna renovate this into an auditorium. That wide shot is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like you could print that on canvas
when
and
it's
like
all the
put
junk?
it up in your room.
You mean it's all the the junk?
Yeah, it's all the junk, and there's like 3 people just like looking around in the room.
Yeah.
It's basically just a shot of like tons of junk and like desks and papers and stuff scattered all around a dirty like empty auditorium or empty warehouse. But the way that it's shot and presented, it looks beautiful.
Well, and also, what about the fact that, like, when it's finished, it's the row of seats facing the stage, and Hekmati comes and sits in the center. Like, that's a very cinematic, beautiful shot.
Like, he's very purposeful with the way that he's placing the camera and framing people within the frame.
There's a lot of, he had talked about how in previous films, especially Film Farsi, you hadn't seen Tehran this way. He wanted to shoot Tehran in a unique way. He said previous films were usually like, if it's in Tehran, it's either indoors in people's houses or at cafes, coffee shops and stuff.
Right.
But like,
or sometimes they would show just like a really busy intersection to show like, oh, look, we're in the city. Yeah.
But the way there's like the chaos of the town and the street and like you've seen maybe exteriors of other films, but you hadn't specifically seen like Tehran shot this way.
Yeah.
So he was like giving it a unique, like these construction buildings that have broken glass and like kids are playing in like the ruins of like construction, because like Tehran was going through like major construction at that time, which Beyzaie said felt like it was losing a lot of its character.
It's funny how these issues are always around for every generation.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing too. The women in this film, it's one of the first times you see, yes, like the deer has really strong women, but in this film you see a woman who's a teacher in a school. Like she's just like an employed woman who has a job. The principal's wife is an employee at the school. Atife is a seamstress at a shop. The women have jobs here.
Yeah.
Like they're just like equal to the men in the town. They're not, like Kiarostami always has like really interesting when she has a woman like The Wind Will Carry Us, but it's like almost like a slightly homeless or crazy looking woman who's serving tea in a shop in a wall.
And usually they're standing for like a mom or something.
Or like the women screaming in the deer. It's like they're just like shouting at each other, and they're almost like a little bit. But this is like one of the teachers is a woman who has like lines and like has like a thing. She likes poetry a little bit.
One of them is like an acclaimed theater actress.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, they're just like I don't want to say that they're really like these well constructed characters, but they're just treated like equal to the men. They're not secondary citizens in their role. They're not mother stand-ins like you're saying, or crazy homeless women screaming in the corner.
I wanted to point out also when Rahim shows up to the play a little bit late.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the first time a lot of people in this neighborhood have gone to a play, so they don't necessarily understand the decorum.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're about to say.
And so Rahim shows up late and he's like trying to sneak in to like sit down. And this like one guy sees him in the back, and he gets up in the middle of the play, and he's like,
"He's the barber."
Hey, everybody! Yeah, is that the barber? He's like, Rahim's here. Everybody, give it up for Rahim! And everyone's like, "Shut up, sit down."
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, Beyzaie said also that whenever he enters a new house, the 3 most important things for him to bring into a new home is a lamp, a mirror, and books. And he's like, that's anytime any Iranian moves into a new house, those will be the 3 things they always bring with them: a lamp, mirror, and books, for sure. They might have other things, but those 3 things are always there. And in that opening scene when Hekmati shows up, those are the 3 things that break. Someone drops a box of the books, Then the mirror breaks,
Yeah.
shatters. Then the lamp is in his hand. And he was saying that this is like his arrival to this town is going to cause chaos. This is a town in harmony. Everyone gets
Right.
along. Hekmati shows up. It's chaos. He's going to bring disorder to like this community and like disrupt it.
Right.
And that was one of the things he wanted to say. But anyways.
And even as things are getting better, it's interesting that at the end of the film, the thing that finally redeems Hekmati's honor in the views of the town is the thing that basically gets him kicked out of town.
Yeah.
Right? Like all the kids get upset and jealous that everyone keeps like praising Rahim.
Yeah. And the principal.
And so they're like, hey, this is bull.
Yeah.
How come Hekmati keeps getting humiliated by everybody? They're trying to like prop up the principal's trying to use him to prop up his own stature, and Rahim is trying to use him to make himself look more appealing to Atefe. We need to do something. So just as they're about to present this like very vain like BS award to the principal, because he bought the auditorium, they're like, well, Hekmati was the one who cleaned it and like renovated it and all this stuff. They're like, we're giving the award to, and then the kids run in and they're like, Mr. Hekmati, the award's going to Mr. Hekmati. And the principal's like, what the hell? Because it was like predetermined.
Yeah.
That ends up kind of gaining the respect of all the townspeople, because not just because of the award, but I think also seeing how much he has won over the hearts of the students. So that finally when the principal is like, you know what, this guy has like taken away what was supposed to be mine, we're going to have him transferred to another school somewhere else so that he has to leave. It is that thing that wins over the hearts and minds of the town is the thing that gets him kicked out of town.
Yeah.
In a turn of irony.
Behind the scenes and trivia. So as I mentioned earlier, restored in 2011 by the Film Foundation's World Cinema Project and Bahram Beyzaie. The film drew quite some international attention and was shown in Italy and the US. Martin Scorsese remarked, "I'm very proud that the World Cinema Foundation has restored this wise and beautiful film, the first feature from its director Bahram Beyzaie. The tone puts me in mind of what I love best in the Italian neo-realist pictures, and the story has the beauty of an ancient fable. You can feel Beyzaie's background in Persian literature, theater, and poetry. Beyzaie never received the support he deserved from the government of his home country. He now lives in California, and it's painful to think that this extraordinary film, once so popular in Iran, was on the verge of disappearing forever. The original negative has been either impounded or destroyed by the Iranian government, and all that remained was one 35mm print with English subtitles burned in. Now audiences all over the world will be able to see this remarkable picture." So that's what Scorsese had to say about this film. This is Beyzaie's first feature film and instantly placed them among the top new wave directors within Iran. He accepted no funding from either the state or the commercial sector. Thus, the film exemplified a cinema of negation. As Hamid Nafisi puts it, hence the reason for technical rough spots. On working on this film, Beyzaie said, "Each of us did the work of 4 crew members, and each of us regarded those jobs as belonging to us. We sought assistance from all our friends, and we used all our own resources. We thank everyone who took a step to help us, and we wish whoever blocked our way or snickered at us more wisdom and culture. We are sorry that because of financial and technical deficiencies, we were not able to create our mise en scene as well as we wished. We shot the film in 24 neighborhoods in Tehran, with the aid of and as witnessed by the residents, many of whom will find their daily lives reflected in it. Much of the film was shot without the usual notes in a very improvised manner. But this does not mean that I did not have any plans in mind. On the contrary, my ideas and plans became real and alive under real conditions. This even helped me to rediscover the meaning of the story."
He actually said mise en scène?
Probably.
That's interesting. That is kind of reaffirming to what we were saying about French influence, like French cinema.
Yeah. Mertosh had touched on this extensively in our Cow episode, but it bears repeating. Beyzaie was one of the 49 founders of the Writers Association of Iran, Kanun Nevisandegane Iran, a community and collaboration of modernist writers and new wave filmmakers who came together in face of stifling political atmosphere in the 70s. They all belonged to the disenchanted leftist intelligentsia, included Beyzaie, Nadir Ebrahimi, Farideh Farjam, Heshmat Jazani, and many others. This was the first civil society formation that defended and fought for the professional rights and free expression of all writers, which included those who wrote for publication, oral presentation, theater, cinema, radio, television. The association spearheaded the writing of some of the famed open letters signed by scores of intellectuals and addressed to the government officials that became important stimuli for political resistance, both during Pahlavi's regime and during the period of the Islamic Republic. Beyzaie's groundbreaking A Study of Iranian Theater, Namayish Dar Iran, published in the mid-60s, is still considered the most important text on the history of Iranian theater. Beyzaie is also the first scholar in Iran to publish books on the theater of Japan and theater of China.
Oh, cool.
So this guy really, and he never went to film school, but he engrossed himself in theater around the world, Western cinema, neo-realism, and Eastern, Japanese, Chinese cinema.
That's cool.
And so he's published books on them. He left Iran in 2010 at the invitation of Stanford University and has since been the Daryabari Visiting Professor of Iranian Studies, teaching courses in Persian theater, cinema, and mythology. He has given workshops on the Shahnameh, the history of Iranian performing arts, Iranian and Semitic myths, and he has also staged several plays, including his 9-hour Tarabnameh. 9-hour, Jesus Christ.
You can actually find a lot of his talks on Shahnameh on YouTube. Like if you type in his name, you'll get hours and hours and hours of his talks and workshops on Shahnameh, which is
on
this
lots
like,
of things.
Yeah, it's this like 1,000 to 2,000, depending on the translation, epic poem that chronicles Iranian mythology and history, which is arguably the reason why Iranians speak Persian and not Arabic.
Yeah. Critics have often praised Beyzaie above all Persian filmmakers as well as playwrights. He was voted the best Persian filmmaker in 2002, and his Bashu the Little Stranger was voted the finest Persian film ever, best Persian film ever. All the same, his formalism has occasionally raised criticism, even from himself. Ebrahim Golestan, who had previously objected to Beyzaie's style, praised him in a letter in 2017. So maybe you'll grow to love him, Bahram.
I did like this more than Bashu.
Okay, good. In July of 2024, just last month, the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences invited Bahram Beyzaie to become a member of the Academy. Beyzaie had been selected to join 2 branches, including the writers and directors branch of the organization. And also in April this year, Beyzaie rejected an invitation to return to Iran, stating that he refuses to be censored by the government or be forced into self-censorship.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
His relationship with Stanford actually led to them having like an entire course on Iranian cinema specifically. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that course is talking about his work specifically.
Yeah, for sure. The strange thing too is like he spent a lot of time thinking about Iranian cinema before he started making movies and after. And remember I mentioned that thing about he didn't see himself in film Farsi. Like he couldn't identify with film Farsi.
Yeah.
Right? It just wasn't his flavor. And he said that like at the time, or maybe he still believes this, but Iran's culture is an unknown culture. Mm-hmm. Failing of our country. Okay, here's the exact quote. He goes, "The failing of our country comes from not knowing and not understanding the meaning of the lives we live. It's a culture we've lived, but we haven't analyzed." So that's how he felt when he started making his movies. It was like, I want to make art house films so that we can analyze ourselves as a culture.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So and when he couldn't do this in film at first, he spent a lot of time doing this stuff in theater.
I have another BTS to share.
Yeah, please.
He was a part of the same Society for Children's Development as Kiarostami.
Yeah, he was a member of that Kanun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he made his first short film was like a children's film.
Yeah.
A kid's film.
And then this movie also, people have said, shows very clear influence from his membership with the Society for Children's Development.
Mm-hmm. Beyzaie said that the process of making Downpour led to him seeing a new Tehran. In the neighborhoods, he found that he wasn't being watched by the law enforcers, but by religious elders and strong men in the neighborhood that would constantly stop them while shooting to see what they're shooting and to see if it follows religious guidelines. This is one of the reasons why it's reflected towards the third act with that guy in the glasses that we'll talk about later. But he was just noticing that in the neighborhoods of Tehran, there's like these like neighborhood elders, kind of like strongmen. They're not law enforcement, but they're just like
they're kind of like the Don. He's kind of like the Don of the neighborhood.
Yeah. So the Islamic regime took over. They stormed a bunch of cinema theaters, and they took the negatives of Ragbar and another film of his called The Crow, and they threw out the reel. Like people were reporting back to Beyzaie that all your film reel is being thrown out into the rain and snow and being destroyed. And Beyzaie got a call later on from a friend saying that he saw kids playing with the ribbons of his film for Downpour in the streets, like playing with the reel like it's ribbon.
Yeah, that's funny.
Last thing behind the scenes. This is quite sad, ending on a somber note. So Parviz Fanizadeh plays Hekmati. So he died very young. He was 42 years old.
Oh, wow.
The reason for this is he had a pretty well documented drug addiction.
Okay.
And it was so bad that he was in and out of rehab during the time of shooting to the point where it caused delays in production because sometimes he'd be like off his meds and he needed like another fix or something.
Oh my God.
So he had drug addiction. He died early. Beyzaie said that had Fanizadeh not died, Beyzaie believes he would have been he'd gone on to be one of the biggest Iranian actors of all time. He loved working with him. He said, "My greatest sadness was watching his addiction destroy him. I don't say this to criticize him. I say this to criticize a society that couldn't appreciate him." So that's behind the scenes.
He was in The Cow. Who did he play in The Cow?
He's probably just one of the townsfolk, I think. Not a specifically prominent role.
He's also in The Deer.
Yeah.
Oh, you know who he is in The Deer?
Remind me.
The neighbor that's wanted by the police.
Okay.
That sells them out.
Yeah. And I remember that's right. I remember him now. Critical reactions, just a few quick ones. It received the top jury award at the first ever Tehran International Film Festival, original TIFF, and was greeted with positive reviews, but it did not do well at the box office when it opened. It opened in 16 movie houses in Tehran, and it landed its producer, Tahiri. I don't remember his first name. I have it here written. But he ended up in jail because of unpaid debts. Beyzaie cinema does not succumb to hypocritical popularism. His devotion in making a film is not to box office success, neither to the official government guidelines nor to the propaganda expectations of any political party. Beyzaie was quoted saying, "The intellectual films were praised for communicating with the mass culture. In that sense, I don't want to be popular. Many of these popular moralities, in my opinion, are wrong, and we are all victims of them. So I have betrayed my people if I endorse them. I have deviated from the morals of the political parties. Hence, they have labeled me inaccessible, not the people. At the heart of my harsh expression, there is a love and respect for the people that does not exist in superficial appraisals of the masses. My audiences are those who strive to go one step further, not those who are the guardians of the old equations, nor those who dread self-examination and self-reflexivity." So he's just like, yeah, my shit's art house and my shit's inaccessible to lots of people, but it's because I want to challenge people and I have love and respect for my audience. He really didn't like film Farsi, like lowbrow, quote unquote, gangster films.
That's interesting.
He thought like mindless action films were not just his flavor. So he was like, I want to make elevated art house films. And if you don't like it, tough.
I mean, it's funny because even while he says that, there's still very clear influences of film Farsi on his movies.
For sure.
If you compare it to something like, I don't know, one of Panahi's films.
Yeah. Or yeah, like just like Beyzaie or something too. Like a lot of films.
Yeah.
Deeper analysis. Take it away, Farhan. June.
During the scene where Hekmati accepts the award, the irony in that scene is this is the moment that really wins over the hearts and minds of the town, but it also solidifies the fact that he's going to get kicked out of town by the two people of prominence.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it basically comes down to this town ain't big enough for the two of us, or for the three of us in this case, where it's like, this guy's the king of the school and this guy's the king of the streets. And Hekmati comes in, and in this moment of the movie, he has usurped them both.
Yeah.
Right? And then as Hekmati is accepting this award, he notices this really like scary looking dude.
Yeah.
I love that guy's look.
Yeah.
He basically has like
steampunk.
Yeah, he's like got steampunk glasses, like these thick sunglasses, or I guess like welding glasses on. Big handlebar mustache. Well, did he have like a leather jacket or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Something. He had some kind of like interesting outfit on, and like perfectly like permed hair, and he just like crosses his arms at the guy as if to be like, you're dead.
Yeah.
And it's like very threatening. And you see that and you're like, what is this about? And I think that scene was very much meant to be like he's seeing his own death, quote unquote. And not death in the traditional sense, but death in the sense of like how he's like, oh, I'll die without Atife. This is that moment of like he's seeing his death. He's seeing an embodiment of that, of this guy who's going to escort him out of town later. And then later at the end of the movie, when he's leaving town, his belongings are being pulled along by that same guy.
Yeah.
And it's never like addressed like who he is, where he comes from, nothing. And that steampunk looking guy is the one pulling his rickshaw, escorting him out of town. And the drum beat that's playing in the music very much feels like the drum beat from like a funeral procession or like a military funeral.
And it looks on the kids. The kids are all walking with their heads down, like pallbearers.
Yeah, everyone's following behind. Yeah. Crying. and the townspeople are all weeping.
Yeah.
And it feels like a funeral. And it's, I think, back to that thing of like, look, you won the hearts and minds of the town, but it was at the cost of Atife, essentially. And he mentioned, I will die without her. This is him, in a sense, spiritually dying without her.
Yeah, he even fades in the horizon. Like they get to the top of the hill and they both just fade away.
Yeah.
There's also, I want to just insert this moment too about why I love Raheem too, is Raheem goes up to him and shakes his hand and is like smiling because he won.
Yeah.
'Cause he's like, at the end of the day, only one, there can be one person. And then you notice when he's shaking his hand and smiling because Hekmati's leaving, you notice all of a sudden a pang of like sadness. Like Raheem's like sad he's leaving too. He's like, I won. And he's like, oh wait, you're leaving.
Yeah.
And he's like sad about that. And there's this whole kind of like dramatic moment of like, is she going to run with him? Like, it's like Atif is watching and her mother or her coworker, boss is like, go after him. He's waiting for you. Go with him. Go. Like, this is your chance. And she doesn't.
Yeah.
It's like, dramatic and sad. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, that's supposed to resemble a funeral procession and a part of him is dying. Like, he's leaving. I want to say this. I'll say this in a different order, but Beyzaie mentioned that one time a friend told him that Ragbar is essentially Beyzaie's story. And he said that at the time when he made Ragbar, Downpour, he never thought he was going to leave Iran as a country. And it was only afterwards in self-reflection that sentence stayed with him forever. The fact that Hekmati leaves this town and never comes back and how much that meant to him. And now he's gone. It kind of does feel like this idea of like him leaving Iran too, which only in like retrospection does Beyzaie realize that he is Hekmati in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So I'm going to quote a lot from Hamid Nafisi, as I normally do, from the social history,
From the book.
A Social History of Iranian Cinema.
Hit us.
He says, Beyzaie revisits this theme in several films. The fear of a stranger entering a community upsets its traditional harmony, unleashing strong reactions of attraction and repulsion, as if the stranger were a sci-fi monster. Only after the total elimination of the threatening strangers could the community return to harmony. The public arrival of the stranger / new teacher, with all his belongings loaded on a cart, is observed cautiously by the neighbors and good-naturedly by nosy children. The teacher attracts and repels because he brings change. The film's voyeuristic structure of vision positions the students to spy on a scene in which Atife complains to Hekmati about his punishment of her brother, a scene that the school children interpret as intimacy. This interpretation soon mushrooms into a neighborhood rumor and the exchange of various knowing and derisive gazes among the fellow teachers. Thus, before Atife and Hekmati own up to their love, the whole neighborhood already knows about it. In a collective and closed community that camouflages core values, people sometimes end up keeping their secrets more from themselves than from others, who through voyeurism, eavesdropping, and rumors gain access to them. This symbolizing the observing and controlling look of Savak's secret agency in society. As the DP and producer, Barbod Tahiri, that's the guy who went to jail for unpaid debt, said, these were what we called Savaki looks. So this idea of like town gossip and everyone's always watching you and always giving an opinion on you, and how Beyzaie said that when he'd enter these like neighborhoods and there was these strong men and like religious figures, they're like, what kind of film are you making here? It's the voyeuristic aspect of like society watching you and its eyes constantly being on you that he's drawing upon here. And that man, in one interpretation, I don't know if the Beyzaie's officially confirmed this, but the DP and producer said it, was that guy's representing Savak. That is now like watching you too closely, not liking what you're doing, and like whisking you away.
That's interesting.
Yes, he also represents death too. But this was a criticism against like everyone's being a spy, everyone's being a gossip, everyone's like, they won't leave, like, everyone's so curious about what you're doing. You're never alone. That joke scene where he goes, it's so good to be finally alone with you, away from prying eyes. And then the wide shot reveals there's 100 kids in trees.
Yeah.
Like, this is a constant thing of like, even the way it's edited, it's like people are constantly watching over their shoulder what you're doing and gossiping about you. So that's one of the things. Agha Rahim Qasab, the neighborhood butcher and bully, helping Atif's family in hopes of winning her affection. The butcher is to the neighborhood what Savak is to the country. Muscular, arrogant, secretive, and bullying. He beats up Hekmati and competes with him in restructuring the auditorium. So that's one thing that sunglasses guy could represent Savak, watching you.
That's cool.
Disapproving and taking you away when they're unplaced.
Has Beyzaie ever commented on exactly who he represents?
I think he's like hinted towards that. It's just, no, I don't think so. I couldn't find it. I think it's deliberately up for interpretation. Feeling more than direct, this is what it is. But he did say that from the title, Ragbar, aside from Bahram being a thunderstorm, it's a specific thunderstorm that comes. Ragbar is like it's thunderstorm that comes very.
It's like a typhoon.
Yeah,
no?
It comes very violently and suddenly. It's one we actually had this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when it's suddenly like, it's one that comes suddenly and goes away suddenly when it's really hard downpour, right?
Right.
And he said, Beyzaie said, Hekmati to this town is like a thunderstorm. He's the Ragbar. He arrives, he causes chaos, and then he leaves them changed. And Hekmati himself has changed.
Yeah.
So Hekmati is like this force of nature that showed up and like disrupted all this harmony, for better or worse, and then left. And he's the thunderstorm in the town, which I thought was interesting.
There's a lot of references to the way that traditional Persian poetry talks about love in the film.
Mm-hmm.
There's a motif of being drunk with love, and having drank from the cup of love or the cup of the heart, or et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of references to that in Persian poetry. And in the movie, there's a lot of similarities made between being drunk and being in love. For example, the first time they have their real date together, right? Hekmati's walking home alone at night, and he's like over the moon just by the fact that Atif said, okay, I'll think about it.
Yes.
She says, I'll think about it. And he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And this police officer is like, hey, what are you doing out so late? And then he's like, oh, I'm like loving life, whatever. He's like, get home, you're going to catch a cold. And he's like, I can't catch a cold. I'm ablaze, which is another reference to a lot of vernacular in poetry. And then he goes, no, you're drunk. And then he goes, no, I'm not drunk. I'm in love, whatever. And that again is, I think, that same reference. And we also see Hekmati and Rahim literally getting drunk together at the bar, which I think is a allegorical representation of the fact that they are also very much drunk in love.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when they're kind of like talking about the fact that they have that in common. They're both in love with the same woman equally. It's while getting drunk at a bar. That's what I miss about Iranian cinema post-Islamic. You just can't get those scenes. I mean, you can, but they're just so few and far. Like two guys just getting drunk at a bar together. I love that stuff.
I was actually surprised that in Layla's Brothers, they show the characters getting drunk and like drinking alcohol.
Yeah, beers, right? They're just drinking beers.
There's like beers, there's like wine and champagne and stuff. But I guess no one ever gets like obviously drunk, so they could probably make the argument that like, no, it's not alcoholic wine and beer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in Downpour, they get obviously drunk.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say about Deeper Analysis, a lot of the themes in his works are about the crisis of identity, which is related to Iranian cultural and mythical symbols and paradigms, especially in his work in theater. Like, it was just this idea of like identity. Who are we as a person? Who are we as a culture? And a lot of that stuff, like the mirror constantly, that he, he's complaining to his friend that he got beaten up by Rahim, and he's sitting there and his friend's taking care of him. And his friend wants to leave. He's like, don't leave. I still got to tell you about like how much she means to me. And the guy holds up the mirror. He holds up the mirror so that he's like, thinks someone's in the room with him. I think that's what he's doing. And he's like, did you leave? And he looks up and he sees his own reflection. He goes, good, you're still here. But he's talking to himself.
Right.
Like, and there's something just about this idea of like, whatever his identity is at the beginning of the film, this town has forced him out of his isolation, forced him to come out of his house, forced him to like become with these people. And he's fallen in love with the community. Remember how much he talks about how it means something to him now? He wants to stay.
Yeah.
Right when he finally wants to stay and be a part of the community.
Because she talks about the idea of like running away together because she wants to leave, but her obligation is making her stay. And she's like kind of toying with the idea of leaving. And he's like, no, I don't want to leave. I love this place.
And right when he decides that he loves this place, that's when fate is telling him he's got to leave.
And now she has that opportunity to leave.
Yeah.
And go explore the world with him. And she doesn't.
I think you should go watch this film again right now, second time. You're going to love it so much more.
I need a bit of a break because I do genuinely still believe that this movie's way too long. For what happens in the movie, I think it's too long.
I could watch.
There's just some scenes that go on too long. And there's some scenes that I think are just like completely unnecessary.
Fair. Wrong, but fair. Best scene. All right. When they talk on the bench is my favorite scene. It's funny. It's beautifully shot, cinematic, charming. I love like right before that, he's like preparing what he's going to say. He's pacing how he's going to say it. He's like, Miss Atif, we can't be seen with each other. Miss Atif. And then he gets there. He's like, Miss, the weather's so nice. He's just like so like captured by it. He's like, it's so nice. That's the thing I said about like, it's so good we're away from prying eyes. You reveal all the kids. But then it ends with him saying, I love you. Like he shuts that out. He can't even like go with what he was part of the script.
Yeah.
I love that scene. It's my favorite scene in the whole movie. And I would love, you talk about like a framed photo, a scene, a still that you could put on your wall. I would love that shot of all the kids in the tree with the two of them sitting on a bench, like framed on my wall. Even getting it signed by Beyzaie in the corner would be so badass.
Yeah.
If someone knows how to do that, please send that to me. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So one of the ones that I had written was that one.
Yeah.
And I do love that shot with all the kids in the tree. It was so good. So it's a toss-up for me between there's the training montage, not the first mini one, but the second one.
Yeah.
And that's my runner-up. And the only reason that I think it doesn't win it is because I think the first mini one kind of shows the hand. Like Beyzaie kind of shows his hand a little too prematurely.
Okay.
But my favorite scene is definitely when the kids get up there and they all start chanting Mr. Hekmati's name. They're all chanting his name. They're like, yeah, no, he won. He wins the thing, whatever. And then everyone starts applauding. And then his friends who all like hate the principal are like so relieved. They're like, yeah, they're like, get up there, get up there. And then you just get this really cool shot of him like walking across the tops of the desks, which the chairs that the audience are using, they're all just like school desks.
Yeah.
So then he like, to get to the front of the auditorium, he gets up and he's walking across the tops of the desks all the way up to the front. And I thought just the way that it's shot, the way that it's presented, the cathartic release, like that was all fantastic. It was so good. And I also think because that scene was so good, I think that's kind of why the movie loses a little bit of momentum for me and why I felt like the movie went on too long, is because I don't think you need a lot of the scenes that come after it, or at the very least for as long as they are. I think you could have shortened a lot of them, and so that you maintain that momentum going into him being kicked out of town.
Wait, so because the scene is so good, you feel like the rest of the film?
Because that movie is such a high point. Like that to me is the climax of the film.
Right, yeah. I see what you mean, yeah.
Right? But then everything that came after it was like it didn't capitalize on the height of that moment. Because you want to end a movie not too long after the height of the movie. Like you have your climax. It's called the climax for a reason.
Right. Well, we have reviewed your submission and you've been disqualified. That note has been rejected. We only recognize your best scene, the auditorium scene. Damn, that's poetry. You have a favorite quote?
I have two.
Okay.
Do you have one or do you have two?
One.
Okay, you give yours just in case one of mine is yours.
After he's gotten beaten up by Rahim, he's talking to his friend and he's like, is it painful? And he's like, getting beaten up was painful, but I actually enjoyed it because it was in that moment I discovered a feeling. I knew I couldn't live without her.
خیلی درد من.
گفتی درد؟ نمیدونم. ولی چرا؟ بذار یه چیز عجیبی رو برات اعتراف کنم. این کتک برعکس تا حدودی هم برام لذت بخش بود. چون در همون حال در خودم یه چیزی داشتم کشف میکردم. موضوع دیگه خیلی جدیه. حس میکردم که بدون اون نمیتونم زندگی کنم.
I just thought it was beautiful because it was like, yeah, getting my ass kicked was like really painful, but it was in that moment that I was like, oh my God, I'm getting my ass kicked because she's actually worth it. I'm in love with her.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's like that's the awakening for him to realize that he can't live without her.
So I have two. One of them I wrote down because I think it was like a funny exchange that's way ahead of its time. And then the other one is like genuinely, I think, very beautiful. So the movie Airplane, what year did that come out?
81, I want to say.
So there's an exchange in the movie that could very much be like one of those quotes from the movie Airplane. And it's so similar that I'm convinced that the movie Airplane somehow, through like osmosis, found out about that joke and then put it in the movie. But basically there's a scene where Rahim shows up and he's looking for Atife. And I can't remember if it's his mom or if it's his boss. I think it's his boss. Is like, where's Atife? And she's like, oh, she went to the cinema. He's like, the cinema? And she goes, yeah, cinema. It's a big building that shows movies.
اگه اومدین دنبال عاطفه با برادرش رفته سینما.
سینما.
آره، سینما که میدونی چیه. همون جایی که توش فیلم نشون میدن.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
It felt very Airplane to me.
Yeah.
Very much ahead of its time in terms of the humor. And then the one that I thought was very beautiful was, we talked about the scene where Atife is like, oh, but like, I feel like you're not long for this town, yada, yada, yada. And then he's like, no, I love this town. Like, I have everything. I have like, helping out the kids has given me such purpose, restoring the hall. I feel so fulfilled. Everything is wonderful, all this stuff. And then she responds, "Oh, good. So you're not missing anything then. You're fulfilled." And he goes, "No, I'm missing you."
خوش به حالت. پس تو چیزی کم نداری.
من تو رو کم دارم.
I was like, that's very beautiful.
It is. Favorite performance? I'll give it to Parviz Fanizadeh. Knowing that this was, I want to give it to Parvana Masumi, but I'll give it to Parviz. Tragically died young, and I think he's really great in this. And yeah, it's the emotional core of the film. I really do also want to give a shout out to Manacher Farid, though, too. But yes, it goes to Parviz. Manacher Farid played right here.
My runner-up is Parvane Masumi, who played Atife.
How dare you?
Actually, maybe like a tie between her and Muhammad Ali Keshavarz, who plays the principal. Those are like my runner-ups.
Yeah.
But my number one was actually Abbas Dastranj. Do you know who that is?
The younger brother?
The younger brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so good.
Yeah, he's good.
He's so good in the movie. And like that thing where you were talking about of having nostalgia for a place that you've never been.
Yeah.
Seeing his scenes gives me that.
That's cool.
Because it reminds me a lot of the like photos that I've seen of my dad and his brothers when they were kids, or like hearing the stories of like what my uncles got up to in Iran, or like seeing Super 8 footage of Iran from that time period. Like this kid, I think, was so good, and I think his performance is very understated.
Yep, that's great. Nitpicks, hot takes, what aged poorly. I don't have anything. I guess my only nitpick is, why couldn't I have met Parvana Masumi sooner? Hot take, we would have ended up happily in love. What aged poorly? Not Parvana Masumi. She aged gracefully, like wine. She's so beautiful.
How does your wife feel about all this?
I don't know. I'll find out when she hears the podcast.
Okay, here's some nitpicks. When
I give you one. Pick
no,
your best one.
I have a couple.
It's gonna get cut anyways.
No.
We're doing this for runtime anyways.
It's fine. They're quick.
God help you if you mention the subtitles again.
No. I already mentioned that.
No, you did. You had to get it in it.
There's a scene where Mosayeb, the younger brother, he's running back to the neighborhood to kill his teacher. He's like, I'm gonna kill him, because everyone keeps bullying him because the teacher is like hitting on his sister.
Yeah.
And while he's running home, at first you see him and he's like in a fit of rage, this kid. Like he's lost it. And his jacket's in his one hand and he has a brick in the other hand. And he's going to go home and like smack the teacher with a brick. Then the next shot we see of him, his jacket is on and it's fully buttoned up. And then the next shot we see of him running home, again in the same momentum, same pacing. He's still sprinting. The jacket is totally unbuttoned.
Oh my God,
and he's
are you
wearing
giving
it.
a continuity fucking error?
You said, Kavit, what's the first word of the section? What's it called? Nitpicks.
Yeah, but they shot this with one. I mentioned that they didn't have, this was not like a Hollywood budget.
Hey, the section of this podcast was called Nitpicks, Hot Takes, and What Aged Poorly. That's a nitpick.
Okay.
And so I couldn't help but imagine what happens between those three shots. And I just imagine him like running in a fit of rage, and then he stops, puts his jacket on, and then he's running, and then in a fit of rage he stops and he buttons it up, and then he's running, and it just, how much that jacket changes from shot to shot was actually, I thought, really funny, but it's definitely a nitpick. There's also a scene where, like I said, I really liked how understated that kid's performance is. There's one scene where they overlay the sound of crying, like a child crying, to show that he's sad.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit because he's like clearly not crying. Mm-hmm. And he's just like very stern-faced, very angry, and they're like playing this crying sound under it, and it was very distracting to me.
Yeah, I hear you on all those. Don't agree with any of them, but hear you. Double feature lineup.
Wait, I have a couple questions.
Questions? That's not a category. Thoughts and prizes?
It's category now.
Okay.
Why was the war footage intercut with the Khastegari scene?
I loved it. It was just funny because it's like he's entering.
I know you loved it, but like, what's the point?
I think it's like he's entering a battlefield. Like he's entering this really awkward, tense situation where like he's gonna hang out with his boss, who's now gonna try to get him to like fall for like Khastegari with his daughter, which he's not interested in. This is my hand, right? And he's like, I just want to go back home. I want to be left alone. I love Atif. This is not going to work out. How awkward this is my boss trying to set me up with his daughter.
Right.
This is the worst situation to be in. And it's like a battlefield. It's like war. I don't know. I just think it was a weird stylistic choice that, I mean, again, that might not even be right. I don't know what Beyzaie was thinking, but that's my interpretation. And I think it's very funny.
And were you okay with his Irish goodbye?
Yeah.
That was weird to me. He just like leaves in the middle of like the conversation and then just shows up staring creepily outside of Atif's window. I was like, what?
Yeah, he loves her. It's called love. Farm.
Why didn't he knock on the door? He's just standing there. And she like wipes the window and looks at him and he's still just like blankly staring into the house.
That was our new section called Questions, where Farr asks me questions. Double feature lineup.
I have a random one.
Mine's Annie Hall. Because every time I think of this film, I feel like it's Annie Hall. That guy really reminds me of a Woody Allen type character.
That's unfortunate.
Annie Hall's a great movie.
No, I'm saying that he reminds you of Woody Allen.
It's the glasses and the hair and the era and the black and white. What's yours?
Mine is the movie Hardball. Have you seen Hardball?
Yeah, with Keanu Reeves?
Yeah.
I have seen it.
Just because it involves a teacher who shows up in this town with a bunch of like reckless children. They ridicule him and they take advantage of him. And then eventually he like wins over their hearts. And then there's also a like romantic subplot and like a little bit of a love triangle. Like,
of all the movies about teachers,
I know
that one's an interesting choice. Like, what about Dead Poets Society or Dangerous Minds or 187?
I like Hardball the most. I think Hardball has the most like heart.
School of Rock.
No, not School of Rock.
Kindergarten Cop.
No, Hardball's the best one.
It's a good one. It's just Mighty Ducks, but baseball.
Way better than Mighty Ducks.
Can this be a modern Hollywood remake? I mean, listen, I know it's
We
sacrilege.
just listed like 20 that are.
I think there is a version that I'd like to do. I would also like to see a version of this film from Raheem's point of view. I think it would be interesting. Take the Biff Tannen from the story. But I would like to see, I would love to tackle a version of this. I think I could bring some new comedy to it. And yeah, I have a vision for this. I can't really go into details yet because I'm keeping it tight-lipped, working on my producer with my producer on it. But I could see it being done. Do you think so?
You need a director. You let me know. I know a director who's directed a rom-com before.
Okay, I'll talk to Roosevelt about it. What are your thoughts on can it be a modern Hollywood remake?
Oh, for sure. Like we just listed like 20 movies that are essentially a modern Hollywood remake of this. I think that it can definitely be done. I have a question. Can you think of a Hollywood film that did this story before this movie came out? Because there's tons of movies in the last like 20, 30 years coming out of Hollywood, even like 40 years, about a teacher shows up to a new town that like has some sense of harmony. He's ridiculed by the like reckless students. He wins them over despite the fact that like all these powers that be are like humiliating the teacher. And then there's a love triangle and all this stuff. Like that has happened so much in the last 30 to 40 years. I can't think of a single Hollywood film that did it before 1971. Can you?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe, but I can't. I don't know.
Maybe this started a trend.
Do you mean like in the rom-com tone of it too? And stuff like that?
Yeah.
The closest movie I think of, it's not about a teacher, but like The Apartment, very much like this, tonally. Starring the Billy Wilder film starring Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. It's a very, very, very good movie. Actually, The Apartment would be a friggin' great, that would be a fun night. That would be my double feature lineup.
Okay, cool. I don't know how I feel if I was a producer on your remake, how I would feel about putting this in Raheem's perspective, because I don't like the idea of making our protagonist have like a weird power dynamic over his tenant. Because even though he doesn't hold it over her, she's like still very conscious of it. And they make a point to show that she's very conscious of it, that she does not want to be with Raheem and she does want to be with Hekmati, but she doesn't do it. And she specifically says it's because she doesn't want him to hold it over her or like kick them out or whatever, like because of that power imbalance. And I also just want to give a shout out to Beyzaie for being conscious of that, of those power dynamics in that relationship there, and for specifically calling it out.
True. Yeah.
Because back in 1971 Iran, that was not commented on. It was just like, well, yeah, he's like in a position of power. Like that's part of courting. That's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. Well said. Shall we go to final thoughts and grades? Final thoughts and grades.
What's your grade, Kaveh?
Now, I'm struggling between two grades because one of them I haven't done yet before, and the other one I don't think does it justice. But I think after some contemplation, I give this movie my first A+. I haven't given an A+ yet, have I?
Let me check.
I think the highest I've given is an A.
No, you haven't. That's interesting.
So this might be my first A+ because the only reason I'm it's like all these like great Kiarostami films and stuff we've seen. Is it going to be this Beyzaie film? And I think it is. I think I'm going to give this an A+ because I think of how revolutionary this film is, how it fits my comedic tone, the style I like, the characters, the fantastic performance by Parvana Masumi, how much I love the big, strong, bad man in this film. I think it's just such a watchable and rewatchable film and so enjoyable. And the fact that it was restored and it's in good quality, every ounce of it, cinematically, just top down perfect. And what I love about films. This movie makes me excited about watching movies and like discovering new movies. So yeah, A+ for me. My first time giving that score.
Wow.
For Downpour, Beyzaie.
I was not expecting that.
I know you weren't.
I like the movie quite a bit. I haven't seen many of Beyzaie's movies yet. It's the funny thing is by the time that this episode comes out, we will have presented one of Beyzaie's other films at the American Cinematheque. But I like this a lot more than Bashu. I think that a lot of his idiosyncratic ways of shooting and presenting scenes and his shot composition works very well for this style of movie, like in the rom-com sphere, something from the 70s. Even just the black and white aesthetic of the film, I think really lends to his style of filmmaking. There were a few scenes that I thought could have been trimmed out or that went a little too long. And sometimes I think the camp was a bit too much for my taste, but other times I found it very endearing. Overall, pretty decent movie. I liked it. I would definitely watch it again, and I feel like watching it again would probably bump up my grade. But for now, I am giving this film a B-.
Wow.
It's like between a B- and a B for me, which would put it roughly around what I gave Bahram, maybe like a hair better. But that means that our Cinemarex average rating for Downpour is A-.
Cool. Beyzaie's cinema does not succumb to hypocritical popularism. His devotion in making a film is not a box office success, neither to the official government guidelines nor to the propaganda expectations of any political parties. A romantic comedy that doesn't deliver what it set up. A neo-realistic, new wave Iranian film ahead of its time, yet borrowing from Italy and France's most prominent filmmakers at the time. A commentary on gossip, identity, and security within pre-Islamic Iran. Downpour is all this and so much more. From the bespectacled, love-lorn Woody Allen-esque nerd who is trying to do right, down to its Biff Tannen strongman with an unsuspecting heart of gold, this film delivers. Thank goodness for Scorsese and the World Cinema Project for saving this film from the brink of annihilation and for keeping Beyzaie's debut film in our hearts and minds forever. As the film ends, a mysterious delivery caravan of our hero's goods is pushed off as mourning children look down in solemn silence as their hero leaves the town. A circular ending, leaving as he arrived, but now with the respect as the town mourns the passing of honest and heroic men. It's a eulogy, not a call to arms. But Hekmati has changed this town, just as Beyzaie is critical in changing the landscape of Iranian films. Maran,
Kaveh.
thank you for joining me in this conversation about Downpour. You know how I feel about you.
Unfortunately. Kaveh, thank you.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And to everyone out there, be omid didar.
Bye. Also, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, upvote, share, leave your reviews. We would appreciate it. You're on the app right now. Literally give us a thumbs up. It'll take you 5 seconds. Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Sohail Sadinejad.